I'm your host, Mr. Hector John from Source. We just want to reach out and touch each and every one of you this evening, listening to Workers' Voice. Earlier on, you listened to Sports Rap with Mr. Lockhart Sebastian, Mr. Emmanuel Loblack calling in, and Mr. Ozil Luis and Lambi on the console. Just want to I know that you had a very good program. Cricket is all over the place right now. You have tennis and other sports. But right now, we just venturing right now into the Workers' Voice, where we'll discuss issues of national importance. We do that. Last week, we had a very good Easter sing inspiration where you had in studios Mr. Daniel Loge, Mrs. Francisca Joseph, our choir leader, Mr. Lennox Linton. We also had other people called in to sing. A lady told me that she sang, and I I was surprised that she called in to sing. T, how are you doing? Good evening to you. Good evening to your grandson Jesse. Hope he's doing much better. And everybody else is not doing too well. I just want to say good evening to you. Yesterday we had the burial of Mrs. Flossie Joseph. I must say I was happy to be there because knew Mrs. Joseph and Mr. Joseph. I was about 10, 11 when I used to go to the market, and that was the first supermarket I went to. Just walk across the street and knew by Flossie's supermarket. So I just want to once again extend sympathies to her entire family, Mickey and all the others. She was laid to rest yesterday. We also have in Salisbury the passing of Miss Frances Frederick. She died in the U.S. and I know her mom Modestine and her siblings and all the others went up. Julia, June, and all the others. Greg, her children, Andy, and your sister. Name not coming to mind right now. Shanna. I just want to say sympathies to you. You lost your dad, Mr. Marcel, some time ago. So now you're burying your sister, wife, and Lauren, and all the other sympathies to you and the passing of Frances. We also want to extend sympathies to the family of Mr. Edison Labad of Newtown, a former custom officer who passed away. We just want to extend sympathies to his entire family, the custom fraternity, on the passing of Mr. Labad. And to all those of you who are not doing too well, Mr. Helios John Charles Lacko, we heard that you're in the hospital. I just want to the prayer warriors to pray for you and hope that you're doing much better. Mr. Gifford Paul and all the others, Mr. Winston, Prosper in Coalition, Mrs. Prosper, nice seeing you all recently, Mrs. Ruby, and Mr. Erickson Joyce in Kolibistri as well, and Mr. Martin in Kaye. Baba, how are you all doing? Mr. My good friend Augustus Massacre Tumon and his wife in England. And each and every one of you will listen to the Workers' Voice in Kulibistri, Monrachet, Mr. Alvin Reese, and family. Shirley, how are you doing? And all the others. I hope you all are doing good. Geraldine and Verna, everybody in Monrachet, hope everybody's doing good this evening. You're welcome to listen to Workers' Voice. Share the live. Call them and tell them that Workers' Voice is on Q95 and also Q95 Radio FM on Q95 FM Radio on Facebook as well. Just join us. I just want to say good evening to each and every one of you listening. Mr. Joseph Hunter, it was nice seeing you on Monday. And everybody else, Mr. Edison James and Mrs. James, it was nice seeing you all on Monday as well. We went around the island, Danny, and it was a very nice experience with my family. My sister, she's on island, Albertine William. You heard of the top farmer in St. Croix. For this year, she won at the Farmers Fair in St. Croix. She's on island. She's my sister, and she's enjoying her 60th birthday with family. And tonight, at my sister's home, Janet home, we're having a prayer meeting, Thanksgiving. She's moving out tomorrow. Just want to give God thanks and praises for having family and being around family. I just want each and every one of you to do that as well, to give God thanks and praises. As I always ask you and advise you on the weekend, go to find a home, a place of worship. That's important. Thank God for the week, and also just ask Him to guide you into the new week. So this time on Workers' Voice, I just want to welcome you on behalf of the leadership of the United Workers' Party, Miss Dr. Thompson Fontaine, our political leader, Mr. Clement Masley, our deputy political leader, Mr. Dr. Lennox Linton, our president, Mrs. Francisco Joseph, our deputy, our vice president, and every other member of the United Workers Party. We just want to welcome you to the Workers' Voice, and just want you to have a wonderful time. Our young people, welcome once again. Tonight we'll have a fruitful discussion, as we always do, and it has to do with our economy, where we are, what are we doing, how are we moving forward. And you heard our political leader, Dr. Thompson Funkin, spoke to the issue of what is going on, the report, the IMF report, and you also heard our president as well. So we'll be looking at these areas and how we move forward as a country, and the challenges that we have, how do we deal with them. It was nice. I'm hearing that our leader and our president on the ball in terms of how do we address this situation that we have. I'm hearing from the grapevine, we'll be having austerity measures come the next budget. That is out there in the public space. So this is something else we have to look at going forward. How do we deal? The last time I heard us having austerity measures was in 2003. So if all the CBI money floating around and we're having austerity measures, something is extremely wrong with us. Something is not right. The management of our resources is a problem. I wonder why. What are we doing with all the money resources that we have? The $4.5 billion is out of state, and why are we facing the IMF right now, and why do we have to sink into austerity measures at this time? So prepare for the rougher roads with the new budget coming up. We are moving into that area. So let me just welcome to the studios of K95. No stranger there from Rosanov. Mr. Danny Luge is in the house with me. Mr. Luge.
Good evening, Honorable Hector John.
Yes.
It's certainly a pleasure, as always, to be sharing with the Dominican people wherever you are, whether it's on island. I'll say good evening first to Rosanov. For the past 11 years that I've been in Parliament, it was a pleasure serving you, and it is still a pleasure serving you, to this day. So, yes, so those of you joining us in the diaspora, let me tell you, welcome to my family members. And also I'd like to say good evening to the John dynasty. Of course, you heard Honorable Hector John spoke of a family reunion. I saw this beautiful picture, everybody clad down to their stockings and socks in blue with Honorable Edison James and Mrs. James. It's always nice to see family members living together in unity. And as Honorable Hector John says, yes, I would strongly encourage that. Family come first. And it was really nice to see the John clan on tour. And they made a stop at Mr. James's and Mrs. James's home. Yeah, but this evening, it's really a pleasure to be in studio. As Honorable Hector John said, we're going to be focusing on the economy. We heard from the IMF, and we had responses from Dr. Thompson Fonkin, our political leader, and the president of the United Workers Party, Honorable Lennox Linton. So this evening, both party leader as well as president of the United Workers Party will simplify the numbers and the hidden messages to the citizens of Dominica as presented by the IMF country report on Dominica. In Dominica today, people are really feeling the crunch. The biggest activity in the city of Roseau from Monday to Saturday are the hundreds of Dominicans standing in line at the Western Union outlet. Even the Wednesday Red Clinic has disappeared in the thin air. No COVID-19 stimulus to Dominica's populace, no civil service salary increase for near 2 decades. Inflation is at its highest in 2 decades. Even a medium-sized onion is easy $1, while a head of garlic is $2. widespread loss of jobs in the private and public sector. Farmers are absorbing heavy losses due to lack of overseas markets and the meager sales in the local market. There is general dissatisfaction in every segment of the population. This evening, we will hear from party leader Dr. Thompson Fountain and U.W.P. President Honorable Lennox Linton, after which we will entertain the people's input on their very own home economy. So stay tuned. It's going to be a very interesting and interactive program, starting with party leader Dr. Thompson Fountain.
Different approach. I'm grateful for an opportunity. I'm grateful for an opportunity to be able to address, in particular, some of the issues around GDP and the performance of the economy and so on, because we've heard different persons within the government and even now the Minister of Finance literally gloating about a recent report from the IMF that indicated 4.5% growth. I think it's important for the listeners to understand exactly what that means, and we'll spend some time because I get the distinct impression that our politicians have been, preying on the ignorance of the people, because the Dominican public may not fully understand those various concepts. And because it's coming from the IMF, they will say, oh, great, our government is doing really, really well because the IMF says so. So we need to put that in perspective, because nothing in that report tells me that the IMF is happy with this government's performance. Bear in mind, the average growth levels for this country has been less than 1% over more than a decade, over more than 10 years, has been less than 1%. So if in 1 year, because you are starting to build an international airport, you're bringing in equipment, you have done a few projects in housing and so on, your GDP goes spikes to 4.5%. And that does not mean that everything is good and dandy. It does not mean that the poverty levels are any less than they were yesterday. It does not mean that the levels of hardships and suffering is any less. So I think it's important for us to put those numbers in perspective. But Mr. G, with your permission, and I think it will help a lot in that discussion. And as we talk about other issues, and all of them are linked, the budget issue, the electoral reforms. We are hearing now that there is supposed to be parliament on the 25th of April. What is being considered as far as electoral reforms are concerned. If I could just begin, and if your permission, just kind of give a very quick definition of gross domestic product and kind of relay in very basic language to the Dominican public what exactly that means and why it is important, and how, what exactly we are talking about when we talk about gross domestic product. Now, quite simply, the gross domestic product, or GDP, it is simply the measure of the value of all goods and services produced in the economy within a given year. Okay, that's your textbook definition. That's your anybody doing economics 101. That will be the definition that you will find. The output of all goods and services produced in the economy within the year. All right. Now, when you talk about value involves two components. Value involves a price component and a quantity or an output component. Okay, so the value of the shirt that I am wearing is this physical shirt times a price. Okay, it might have cost me $10. Okay, so that's the value of the shirt. So what you try to do is you try to measure the value of all of the goods and all of the services, banking, insurance, retail services, all of the services that are provided within the economy. Now, there are different approaches to actually measuring, and that's where it gets very interesting. There are different approaches. The one approach that is widely used is called the production approach, where you segment or you break up the economy into various segments, if you like. or sectors. So you have the agriculture sector, you have the fisheries sector, you have the manufacturing sector, you have the government services sector, you have the banking sector, you have the insurance, So you have the different insurance, you have different sectors within the economy, and you try to put a value on the production within those sectors. So that is one way of doing it. Another way is that you use this very famous equation, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, okay? Or your consumption spending plus your investment spending plus your government spending plus your net exports, the difference between your exports and your imports. And that also gives you a valuation of your gross domestic product. Now, when you use, and there is a third measure, which is the value added. So you try to see what value is added to goods and services. Now, let me explain in very, very simple terms, and we can understand it better if we think of a very simple economy. Let's say an economy is producing only one good, all right? So let's assume that there is this economy, and once you understand this one good concept, you can multiply it to any number of goods, any number of sectors, any number of services. So let's assume that in year one, in this country, you produce goods worth $100, okay? So let's make it very, very simple. So you're producing shoes. You produce 100 pairs of shoes during this year, 100 pairs of shoes. You sell these shoes for $10 each, those pairs of shoes. So you have 100 pairs of shoes, you sell that for $10, that's $1,000. Your total output for that year is $1,000. Okay, because you have 10 shoes valued at $100. That is $1,000. That's your total gross domestic product for that year. In the second year, you're still producing shoes. You produce those same 10 shoes, but you sell those shoes for $20. So your gross domestic product has increased now from $1,000 to $2,000 because you've also produced 10 shoes in year two, but now you're selling them at a higher price. You've doubled the price, so you're making more. Your output has increased. Not your output, the value of your gross domestic product has increased. Now that is what we refer to as the nominal value. Okay, the nominal value, because bear in mind, you have two components, the quantity of shoes produced by the price. In year one, you produce 10 shoes by 10 shoes, you produce 100 shoes, by $10, $1,000. In year two, you produce the same 100 pairs of shoes, but you now sell them for $20. Your output has now increased from $1,000 to $2,000. You say your gross domestic product has increased. However, your GDP growth, your real increase, which is what these figures that we have been quoted about, the 4.5%, the 1%, is really what is referred to as the real GDP. You have to remove the price effect. Okay, in that case, it is very simple because in year one, you produce 100 pairs of shoes. In year two, you produce 100 pairs of shoes. You have shown no real growth. Although your nominal GDP has increased from 1,000 to 2,000, that is only on account of the price having increased. But in terms of what your actual output was, you're still producing the same amount as you did last year. So in year two, you produce 100 pairs of shoes as you did in year one. Therefore, your real GDP has not increased. You would say that in year two, you have zero GDP growth. Okay, so the correct measure would have been zero GDP growth. Now, let's take this a little further. Let's assume that in year two, instead of making 100 pairs of shoes, let's assume you decide to make 110 pairs of shoes. Okay, 110 pairs of shoes, you sell by the same $20. But because you have moved from 100 to 110, it means that to make this extra 10 pairs of shoes, you would have had to hire probably 2 or 3 new workers because the workers you had in year one can no longer produce. You now have to hire because you're making an additional amount of shoes. Okay, you're making 110 pairs of shoes now. You have to hire additional workers. And that is where real GDP becomes important. Because you're moving from 100 to 110, you have to hire new workers, you're creating new incomes. You're creating unemployment. You're reducing poverty. And that is why the real GDP growth is very important. You're looking at the value, not just the value, but the actual output of goods and services. Okay, so I hope people understand and you make that distinction. So when the government talks about, or when the IMF talks about the 4.5% increase, they're referring to the physical, if you like, quantity of goods and services that have been produced in that year. Okay, now in a way you think of it as disjointed growth. Now let me compare this, for example, with what happened in China in the 1990s and so on. What happened in China was a largely agrarian economy. Millions and hundreds of millions of people in poverty. And then they began to pursue a very open policy. So they invited all of those Western firms. They had this economic zone.
Yes, you were listening to Dr. Thompson Fontaine, the leader of the United Workers' Party. We was giving you some information on the IMF. Let's see if to understand what transpired there. Yeah, look at us. I know. So we was discussing. I know you heard Dr. Fontaine. We'll be doing more of that tonight. You'll hear also, or the president of our party as well. We're just getting some information that just clarify there and get a little glitch we had. They're just going to deal with it and we'll continue. In the meantime, just prepare yourselves to call in the program and make a contribution, on the economy. As I said earlier on, we're hearing there'll be austerity measures coming in during the new budget presentation for 2023-2024. So we'll have to hear what the new Minister of Finance has to say about our economy and what type of measures, austerity measures that will be under come July 2023. So we just want you to continue to listen. We are also on Q95 FM radio on Facebook. You can listen to us there as well. You can make a contribution in the comment box as well. We also on Q95 FM radio, and you can listen to us there. You can call in very soon at 4493095, 4493096, 4493097, 305-432-9624 from the overseas line, 305-432-9624. And you can even WhatsApp us on 265-4334. We want to hear what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you'd like to see happen in terms of the economy, what's happening to you, how you've been affected in your pocket, how you've been affected as a citizen of Dominica. Mr. Luge, so far, when you listen to Dr. Fontaine, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, well, before we get to that, I think in Rosenhof we had a death I kind of overlooked of Carly Dover from Stock Farm. There's the huge Dover family. They're really my good friends and constituents.
Bobby and all the others.
Bobby Dover, Francis Dover, Glenn, Lenroy, so their sister, who is Carly Dover, passed of Stock Farm, and we'd like to extend condolences to the entire family, her daughter and the rest of the family, uncles, the sister and brothers. We really like to extend condolences to the family. So yes, listening to Dr. Fontaine, one of the things that in our party that we have to understand, we have people who comprehend the IMF report. On the other side, you wonder if they really do understand, what it is that the IMF is saying. And a little later, I don't want to go rush ahead of my party leader or my president. I'm sure when you listen to our president, he will break it down. Earlier on in my introduction, I spoke of, when we refer to inflation, you know, one way of looking at it, I mentioned
real GDP.
the
You
head.
have to remove
Yeah.
the price effect. Okay, in that case, it is very simple because in year one, you produce 100 pairs of shoes. In year two, you produce 100 pairs of shoes. You have shown no real growth. Although your nominal GDP has increased from 1,000 to 2,000, that is only on account of the price having increased. But in terms of what your actual output was, you're still producing the same amount as you did last year. So in year two, you produce 100 pairs of shoes as you did in year one. Therefore, your real GDP has not increased. You would say that in year two, you have zero GDP growth. Okay, so the correct measure would have been zero GDP growth. Now, let's take this a little further. Let's assume that in year two, instead of making 100 pairs of shoes, let's assume you decide to make 110 pairs of shoes. Okay, 110 pairs of shoes, you sell by the same $20. But because you have moved from 100 to 110, it means that to make this extra 10 pairs of shoes, you would have had to hire probably 2 or 3 new workers, because the workers you had in year one can no longer produce. You now have to hire because you're making an additional amount of shoes. Okay, you're making 110 pairs of shoes now. You have to hire additional workers. And that is where real GDP becomes important. Because you're moving from 100 to 110, you have to hire new workers, you're creating new incomes, you're creating unemployment, you're reducing poverty. And that is why the real GDP growth is very important. You're looking at the value, not just the value, but the actual output of goods and services. And then they began to pursue a very open policy. So they invited all of those Western firms. They had these economic zones. They invited those Western zones, and they began to produce Nikes and jeans and iPhones and every conceivable thing you can think of, item that you can think of, consumer item that you can think of. But what that meant effectively is that they were providing jobs. So with every new production, they would open a new factory. Okay, and you'll find China was recording double-digit growth for many, many years, 15, sometimes 12, 15% of growth for many years. But that translated to individuals coming out of poverty, because now this person who was languishing on a farm in rural China is now working, making iPhones. He's now earning an income out of this. So they're recording increases in iPhone production every year, increases in suits or whatever it is, in Nikes and so. But there is a real tangible growth. It's like in Dominica in the 1990s under the United Workers' Party and under the Dominican Freedom Party prior to that, you had the agriculture sector booming. Agriculture sector was the one driving that growth. 70% of the Dominican public lives in the rural areas of Dominica. So when bananas was king, when bananas was our green gold, it meant that that was impacting the lives of thousands of Dominican households. Farmers could send their children to school because we were producing increasing numbers of bananas that were going to the UK. You could send your children to school. You could buy your own house. You could build your own house, you know, in the countryside. You could put money into the bank to help build up or boost up the banking system. That was right. That was widespread. It was within the agriculture sector. A lot of that growth was taking place. Now, compare then to now. A lot of the growth, as you rightly pointed out, is being driven by capital spend. Remember I said if you measure in GDP using the approach consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. If government spending in that year, which is what happens, suddenly increases exponentially, you're going to find a big increase in GDP. Okay, but where is that going? The beneficiaries of this GDP is not the average Dominican person. It is limited, it is targeted largely to foreigners because, on the airport project, it is Chinese workers. Even to build the housing projects that would contribute towards GDP, it's targeted towards foreign workers. Now, why is that also important? The way a dollar is spent makes all the difference. When there was agriculture, for example, when a banana farmer sold a box of bananas, he got paid for that box of bananas. That Dominican farmer, that's now reflected in a 5% growth in the economy, now takes his dollar that he's earned from the sale of a box of bananas. He then goes to his local shop, okay, and he buys a beer for $5. Now that has a multiplier effect because now that $5, the shop owner can then take that $5 now and buy something else. And you have this multiplier effect throughout the economy. So that shop owner can now hire an assistant in the shop because the local farmer is coming to buy and the shop owner is too busy or needs extra help to service the farmers coming in to buy in the shop. So she can employ somebody else or two people. So that creates additional activity, additional opportunities. What's happening now with the construction sector, when this money is paid to a foreigner, he's not going to a local shop in Dominica or to a local concern in Dominica. This individual is going to send this money outside of Dominica. You have a net outflow. So whatever you have gained up front, you're now losing in the back end for what we call leakage, because the money is going out of the country. It is not as beneficial. So we have what we call a beneficial growth and we have non-beneficial growth. And what we have under this Dominican Labour Party, I'm sorry to inform the Minister of Finance, is really growth that is not beneficial per se to the average Dominican. And we need to understand that. So I would not be out there boasting. I can understand if this growth was coming from agriculture, if this growth was coming from the construction sector, where the majority of employment was with and by Dominicans, I would be the first one shouting hooray. But I cannot be praising this in a situation where the majority of Dominicans are not seeing the benefits. Poverty continues on the rise. And the minister himself said it. The minister made a very telling, in his speech, a very telling, what he called an acceptance, when he says, we'll continue to maintain this support to the vulnerable people. Now, if this growth was beneficial, you'd be saying that last year, we were able to win X amount of people away from public support because the economy was expanding. These individuals no longer need us to support them. They are now finding jobs. But they say, no, we need to continue to maintain and support these individuals. So it means that the benefits are not accruing to the people. So you still have to maintain, give these $300 a month. You still have to give the social programs. You have to have the social safety nets. That is a very clear indication that the GDP that you're talking about, the growth that you're talking about is not sustainable.
I think we've done pretty well. The IMF was pleased with our progress, and we just have to continue on this track, and we should see our way through.
You'll recall there was a 16.6% decline in GDP in 2019. Total value of goods and services in 2019 declined by 16.6%. The IMF is now reporting real GDP growth at 6.9% in 2021 and 5.7% in 2022. And it says the growth was driven by construction of housing, shelters, healthcare facilities, roads. There's a rebound in tourism and an increase in agricultural production. Dominicans felt the 16.6% decline in GDP in 2019, but they haven't felt the growth of 6.9% in 2021 and 5.7% in 2022 because the construction of housing and the shelters and the healthcare facilities and so on that drove the growth and the increase in agricultural production was all about employment of foreign workers. People came in from the outside to benefit from the jobs in construction and agriculture and sent hundreds of millions of dollars in employment income overseas. So it was not growth for Dominica. It was growth for people from the outside. And that was confirmed in a recent statement by the Prime Minister, that there is money in the Dominican economy. The economy is growing, but it's growing for foreigners who have the privilege of being employed in Dominica and can export hundreds of millions of dollars in employment income overseas for the benefit of their economies. The IMF says the citizenship by investment revenue is at record high levels. But overall, government is spending more money than it collects, so much so that the difference between what is collected and what is spent on public goods and services, called the primary balance, deteriorated to negative 6.2% of GDP in 2021-2022. The public debt is at 107% of GDP, and this is higher than the debt of Dominica's regional peers, who don't enjoy as much passport money as Dominica does. Then we're told the financial sector is very liquid. Even so, credit to the private sector is subdued. It is down. Banks remain well capitalized, we're told, but lending for productive purposes in this growing economy has underperformed relative to GDP growth. So the banks have money, they're not lending for productive purposes in the growing economy. And then we are told the economic outlook is positive. That is based on a full recovery in tourism in the near term and the implementation of the public investment plans.
2023-2024, we expected to stay at about 4.5% growth, which is good for us. Obviously, what we have to do is just to manage our debt to GDP ratio, which we have put many things in place.
After COVID, we took a 16.6% nosedive, and then we came back up 6.9% and 5.7%. So with the 4.5% this year, we should climb back to where we were before COVID. Tourism now is returning to pre-COVID levels, we're told, and that will keep the growth above 4.5%. Also, the construction of the new international airport and geothermal power plant will take hold in 2023-2024. But insofar as it concerns the international airport, we're not sure what exactly is going to happen or what is going to be spent in this year that will help to drive growth up to 4.5%. There's talk of building an international airport, but at this stage, there are no drawings for the airport. There are no designs for the airport. The airport is still at the stage of soil testing. The geotechnical surveys are being done. 624 holes have to be dug into the ground so that they can take soil samples to test. 148 have been done for 1 year, which means the other 476 holes and the testing of the material coming out of those holes will take another 2 to 3 years. It is only at that point that you will have drawings, because then is when you know what soil you're dealing with. You'll have designs, and then you can know what the airport is going to cost you. But even without that, we already know it's going to be $1 billion airport. And recently, the $1 billion jumped up to $1.3 billion. Another $300 million was added, just like that. No drawings, no design, but you know all these things about the cost and money spending. How much of the money is going to be spent in this year without a plan, without a design, without drawings, while you're still doing geotechnical surveys? Nobody knows. But what is going to be happening at the international airport will be enough to help drive growth up to 4% in 2023-2024. Then they talk about the current account deficit that is going to narrow gradually. It is somewhere around 28% of GDP now over the medium term. And that is going to happen because of increased tourism exports. on the back of expanded hotel and air transport capacity. Where's the expanded air transport capacity going to come from? Nobody knows. What is the specific plan for expansion of air transport capacity at this time? And then the IMF tells us about the downside risks like volatility of the CBI revenue, shortfalls in CBI inflows that could hamper the implementation of the infrastructure investment plans, the climate resilience, economic activity, and the fiscal position, the revenue expenditure performance of the government. And it's a surprise to hear that because this same IMF has simply been taking the CBI revenue numbers given to it by the government without paying attention to any verification of those numbers. The CBI numbers that the IMF is working with coming from the government are totally off with respect to the financial years 2016 to 2020. Those revenues are off by over $4 billion, $4.2 billion to be exact. The IMF pays absolutely no attention to that. With this $4.2 billion being held unlawfully and unconstitutionally overseas, the economy of Dominica has been placed under unnecessary pressure, under unnecessary burden. The IMF knows that, yet it colludes with issuing these reports that cancel out the significant CBI revenues already collected, but being held unlawfully and unconstitutionally overseas. So the reporting of the IMF, insofar as it concerns CBI revenues, has no credibility where I'm concerned. It speaks of disruptions in correspondent banking relationships that could raise barriers to trade as one of the downside risks as well. And then we're told in the report that to safeguard room for climate resilience investments and ensure compliance with the regional debt target, fiscal consolidation efforts should redouble. They want to raise the primary balance to 2% of GDP by 2026. So going forward, they would like to see this primary balance, this difference between what the government collects and what the government spends on public goods and services. They want to see that balance at positive 2% of GDP by 2026. And they say that that is necessary if the country is going to reach the 60% debt to GDP ratio target by 2035. The plan to get that done has to be underpinned, according to the IMF, by big improvements in non-CBI revenue. So non-CBI revenues, you're talking about taxes, essentially. In other words, they're going to tax the people of Dominica more. And the language in the IMF report is, very diplomatic. They talk about streamlining tax incentives and reviewing personal income tax allowances and strengthening tax administration. These are code words for we're asking the government to increase the tax burden on the suffering people of Dominica. In addition to that, they want to phase out reduction of the VAT on electricity, which means your electricity bill at the end of the month is going to be higher. They want to increase water and sewage rates to strengthen the financial position of the publicly owned water company, thereby reducing contingent liabilities. In other words, you're going to have to pay more for water. You're going to have to pay more for electricity. And they want to increase the motor vehicle licenses or road tax now to compensate from the losses that came from foregoing the highway levy. They're looking at all of these areas of revenue generation, which is what the finance minister is talking about.
In terms of our revenue, we've identified quite a few areas that we can improve our revenue.
But these have been dictated already by the IMF. On the spending side, the IMF says it remains critical to reduce the wage bill through civil service reform. And
obviously with the reform of the public service, in the sense that it will be a more efficient one. It allows for upward mobility, but most importantly, it allows for efficiency.
You see, again, Nice language, but what they're going to do is send home public servants. In other words, they're going to cut jobs in the public sector. That is what this means. And they also talk about efforts to continue to rationalize inefficient spending. Inefficient spending is what? These fancy terms. $64,000 a month renting a property for the prime minister, is that efficient spending? You think the efficiency in spending can only be taken care of by going after the jobs of public servants? That is the report that the finance minister is commenting on, when he tells us the IMF is very happy with them. Everything is fine. Here's an interesting one. The IMF is telling Dominica that it is essential to strengthen social protection systems using proxy means test methodology to tailor social assistance to vulnerable households in a systematic way. Let me break down the coded language for you. There's too much politicization of government assistance programs for the less fortunate. So in other words, you need to do this more professionally. It's going to be the PAL reps of Labour Party that are deciding who must get what when. You must target the vulnerable people in a systematic way that would enable the streamlining of all those untargeted programs you have now, which are the highly politicized program where you're using the public money to buy votes and buy influence. And here is the proposal. As a first step, the IMF says, completing the ongoing population census, which would form the basis for a comprehensive social registry, is paramount. In other words, no more vai political decisions about who must get the assistance. Let it come from the comprehensive social registry that will be built up from the completed population census. That is paramount in setting the basis on which you remove the politics from the distribution of social services or from the operation of the social protection system. And interesting one, this one to do with the modernizing of the supervisory framework, which according to the IMF is crucial to preserve financial stability. What it says is that modernizing the supervisory regulations and granting statutory independence from the Ministry of Finance would further improve its effectiveness and support risk-based supervision. The regulations, finance regulations, taken care of by institutions like the Financial Services Unit, the Financial Intelligence Unit, all of which operate under the Ministry of Finance. The IMF is proposing that institutions like that be granted statutory independence. In other words, they must operate independently from the Ministry of Finance. So when the finance minister tells you how happy the IMF is with Dominica in its recent Article 4 consultation report, read well and pay attention to what the IMF is saying in its very cleverly worded language, which is not intended to offend the government. And in some cases, obviously, where the CBI revenues are concerned, to collude with the government in tricking and deceiving the people of Dominica. Be very careful of that.
Yes. Welcome back. You're listening to some discussions on the IMF report. First, you heard our political leader, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and then you heard you listened to our president, Mr. Lennox Linton, on the IMF Article 4 report that was just released in April. And I just want us to listen. We're going to be discussing some of the takeaways from that discussion and where we are in terms of our economy, how the IMF sugarcoat a lot of the issues that we have in some of the areas of concern that were raised, and how we see us moving forward Are we in a better place today, 23 years later? Are we, with all that money we have, CBI money that we have all day, are we in a better place? Let me just welcome Mr. Danny Luge. We're going to welcome your calls as well as we discuss, and there's also a gentleman in the house as well that will join us in the discussion as we move forward this evening here on Q95. Listen to the Workers' Voice and we're going to be discussing some of the takeaways, the discussion that came in from the clip from our political leader, Dr. Thompson Fountain, and also President Mr. Lennox Linton. Mr. Luge.
Yes, you asked me, are we better off 20 years later?
23 years later.
23 years later.
Yeah.
I would compare it to, as we always know, we worked in the banana industry, in my case, for 31 years. So I know.
My case was 16.
In your case, 16. So when you add that up, that's how much experience?
47.
47 years experience.
Yeah.
And we saw the two previous administrations, which was the Freedom Party and the United Workers' Party.
Yeah.
In both administrations, bananas was king. I remember, several times I keep referring to that interview I had with Eisenhower Douglas, where back then, right, in the days of the Freedom Party and the United Workers' Party, where the banana dollar was circulating in Dominica, to every dollar circulating, Eisenhower Douglas shared with me, 60 cents was coming from bananas. Now, if you think about it, that's foreign exchange.
Right.
That's the British pounds coming in and circulating in every community. Earlier on, you heard the comment from both Dr. Thompson Fountain and Honorable Lennox Linton.
And Dr. Fountain make specific mention about how it is being stretched. Been stretched in the community. Yeah.
You're talking about when, like a banana farmer, he would buy a vehicle.
Yeah. Go to the mom and pop shop.
Or you'd go to the bum shop, or you would go to the bar and spend $5. So that dollar would, be circulated several times in a community and even out of his community, because it would circulate in his community, let's say Wesley or Woodford Hill, but also he would come down to the city of Roseau, he'd go up with a fridge, a stove, or whatever, and that made a vibrant economy. Now, today, you heard the comparison by Mr. Linton, where a lot of the money that living through Western Union from the foreign workers really means that money, yes, it's coming into Dominica, but it's going out through the back door. So really and truly, Dominicans are not better off. And I gave the example in my introduction of inflation. What is inflation? Salaries not going up at all or very little for the past 20 years, yet the cost of items, food items and other items,
the cost of living generally.
Cost of living is way up. So we're certainly not better off.
And Danny, just to, before we bring in our next gentleman in the house with us, is that when you talk about, and just to add to what Dr. Fountain and Mr. Linton was saying about the dollar stretch, a farmer could go in a shop in the rural community and query, as we said in the local parlance, from Sunday to Thursday or even Friday. But the shopkeeper knows that the farmer is getting paid on Friday and he will get his pay. And that's what they're talking about circulating. We only had, on an average, between $35 to $40 million just from banana production and revenue circulating in the economy. You know what? When you had the SAG motors and those people bringing in the Acne garages and Astafans bringing the different vehicles, farmers were buying their vehicles cash. Right now, what do you have? And you have that total removal of revenues from bananas from the UK, from our economy up since 2015. January, we stopped exporting to the UK in January 2015. So we're exporting nothing. Another example where we are not exporting anything is the amount of empty containers on the port. The port is up. I worked on the port for 16 years, every Thursday and Friday, purchasing bananas. And I've never seen containers on the Woodbridge Foncoley port like that. So that means they're coming in with goods, but nothing is they're leaving empty. So the owners and maybe the vessels not even busy to come back to Dominica for them. So this is some
just a brief comment again. There was a comment made about our banks.
Yeah.
There's money in the banks, but nobody not borrowing that money. Why? The reason why people not borrowing, they do not have confidence in the economy to support any big loan.
No, but another thing that happened again, just before we bring in, let me just make that point quickly. This afternoon I was having a conversation about the housing sector. And a young lady was saying that she want a house, but she want to pay for it because she want her documents in her hands. But you had the government saying about $600 million was spent on housing, but nobody took a loan. Everybody have a house they didn't pay for. They are not paying for. They're not even paying a little stipend for maintenance of that property, but they have a free house. So what do you expect the banks? Not even tell them to take a loan on 0% or 0.5%, and so that's the challenges you have. But we have in studios with us as well. You just heard his voice in terms of breaking down the report and even what the Minister of Finance had to say on that IMF Article 4 report as well. Let me bring to the microphone of Q95 the president of our party, Mr. Lennox Linton from the Maribel constituency. Mr. Linton.
Good evening, Honorable Elector John. Good evening to Honorable Danny Luge. Good evening to the other members of the National Executive, the members and supporters of the party around the country, Dominicans, one and all, here at home and abroad. Always a pleasure to be here on the Workers' Voice. In this matter of the economy, the state of the economy, and the government's handling of the economy, you would have heard in the report some numbers like the debt, the state of our debt. There was a time in Dominica when all people talked about from the Labour Party was debt to GDP ratio, under the United Workers' Party, and they made all sorts of false stories about the extent of the debt to GDP ratio on the United Workers' Party. All lies, because we had the opportunity in the Parliament recently, a couple of years ago, to read out the debt to GDP numbers from 1995 when the United Workers' Party took office, all the way up until 2020. And the stories that Ian Douglas and company were bringing to the Parliament were totally false, but they were accepted all the time. And when we tried to correct the record with the facts and the truth, there were any number of attempts to block that from happening so that the record of deception and dishonesty could stand in the Parliament. But the question we ask ourselves is, given what we know about the significant sums of money being held unlawfully and unconstitutionally overseas, what really is the purpose of talking about debt to GDP ratio, Dominic, at this time of 107%? We don't have to have debt to GDP ratio of 107%. We have enough money overseas from citizenship revenues in the 4-year period 2016 to 2020 to clear our debt, because we have $4.2 billion. The debt is in the region of 1.4 billion or thereabout. We can wipe off that debt completely and operate now with zero debt in our circumstances. The IMF obviously is uncomfortable with any country operating with zero debt, because somehow your economy must be in a state where they feel they have work to do and they are exercising control over you in terms of telling you what to do. So they seem to me to be going along with this falsehood that Dominica does not have the amount of money that Dominica has outside of the formal accounting system that operates from the Consolidated Fund of Dominica, where all the monies belonging to Dominica is supposed to be. And it is shocking that an institution like the IMF could repeatedly be coming to Dominica for Article 4 consultations over the period and not be in a position to verify the revenue numbers from citizenship by investment. It is a shame and a disgrace that the IMF is actually just accepting the revenue numbers from citizenship by investment given to it by the government, which are way off the mark. The government is clearly, deliberately underreporting the numbers for the purpose of keeping significant amounts of the state's money outside of the consolidated fund, unconstitutionally and unlawfully under private control overseas. And that is creating a huge problem for us. We are dealing with problems that we don't have. We don't have a debt problem. With the amount of money we have sitting outside, we do not have a debt problem, but we are pretending, we're giving the impression to the world that we do. And the IMF is on board with that because that keeps us under their thumb and that keeps us taking direction from them. So you hear, for example, the finance minister talking about the revenue measures that they have agreed on. What revenue measures? You're going to tax the people more? You're going to cut the public servants, the wage bill of the public sector by sending home public officers? You're going to increase electricity bills, water bills. You're going to increase the road tax. Why are you doing all that? What is the purpose of all of that? Given the revenues that we have, that is totally unnecessary at this time. Let the people enjoy their money. Let them have more disposable income. Let them spend. And in spending and in having disposable income, being able to make a contribution to the expanding economy. The economies where people have no money to spend are economies that do not do well. And for 20 years, for 23 years in government, this Labour Party has not understood the value of money in the hands of people. They all believe, all of them consistently over the years believe that it is in their best interest for them to have all the money and for the people to have none. Where are you going with that? So this story over the years about how much they love poor people, I've repeatedly said, and I want to say again tonight, it's not a question of Labour Party loving poor people. Labour Party and Roosevelt Skerrit and Company, they love people to be poor. Because every report you see, every analysis you make is consistent with that truth, that the Labour Party really loves Dominicans to be poor. If they didn't like Dominicans to be poor, all of the Dominicans who have received apartments paid for by the passport monies from Dominica, and they've been living in them for 2-3 years, some of them now, they would have title to those properties already. But they don't. They don't. So what love you love poor people. Mm-hmm. And then the IMF is also telling us, hello, there's too much politicization of the social programs in the country. Yeah. And you need to get it right. So they put it in very nice language, but the IMF is not happy with that. Yeah. And then
but you heard the minister as well making a reference to that in the end of his comment about they will keep this program.
Yeah, but there'll be no double dipping. Right? Double dipping means people are getting twice when others are getting none. Yeah. Others who in need are getting none. That's what the double dipping means.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So
fix that.
So they themselves realize even the minister is making it known that they have a problem with the system.
So what happens here now is that you see the way in which the government is running the affairs of the country, the way in which the economy is managed. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of mismanagement. There's a lot of irregularities there. And while all that is happening, while we worry about our passport money overseas, we're seeing all sorts of accumulation of wealth in Dominica by certain privileged individuals, and we're seeing multi-million-dollar buildings going up, properties being owned. We have the House of Dark Secrets in the center of Roseau, $40 million plus, owned by a member of the cabinet. And when we ponder what is going on, we ask ourselves, well, where is the Integrity Commission? Because we have integrity in public office legislation. So far, what has it done for us? And tonight, I want to draw the attention of the people of Dominica to an article that appeared today in the Jamaica Gleaner. It is about an Anglican leader who wants an energized fight against corruption, protection for minimum wage earners as well. He wants an energized fight against corruption and protection for minimum wage earners. That's Archbishop of the West Indies, Anglican Archbishop of the West Indies, Dr. Howard Gregory. He's calling on the nation's political leaders to stop fiddling with and emasculating the Integrity Commission, IC. He issued the charge in a wide-ranging address during the opening service of the 152nd Annual Synod of the Diocese in Montego Bay, St. James, on Tuesday, under the theme, A Renewed Church for a Time of Critical Social Change. Bishop Gregory, Archbishop Gregory, who is also Bishop of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, reasoned that the country has developed a culture of corruption, thievery, fraud, dishonesty, extortion, and scamming. He said that citizens are tired of the pervasiveness of corruption and the seeming inability of political leaders of both political parties to act decisively in addressing the situation. Quote, "We must therefore, as Christians, stop playing around with party politics and demand of our politicians that the Integrity Commission be allowed to do its work and not be an instrument for the protection of vested interests and the status quo." End of quote.
That could well be speaking of Dominica.
Reflecting on the state of Jamaica, Archbishop Gregory noted that employment and labor relations are being made a major driving force for the widening social and economic gap within the nation. The clergyman asserted that though Jamaica's economy is moving in a positive direction, quote, "the streets below tell another story of a moral, social, and religious crisis of corruption, injustice, and deceit," end of quote. Gregory said that Jamaicans are losing a sense of value and respect due to each other, which is reflected in the ease with which lives are taken, the widening social and economic inequalities, and the distinction in the value and treatment accorded to different members of the society. Quote again, "The person who has no appreciation of his own sense of value and worth will have no appreciation for that of his fellow citizens. With a knife or gun in hand," end of quote. He underscored that there are open-ended levels of salaries for those at the top, while wages of a significant section of the population are fixed at levels that are not livable, even as poverty abounds. And this is another quote. "It is noteworthy that the salaries paid at the highest levels never raise any questions about their inflationary effects, but any increase in the minimum wage is deemed a cause of inflationary escalation in the economy. The privileged who can spend 1 week's earnings at minimum wage on one afternoon's happy hour seem not to be concerned about the many who go to the pharmacy counter to ask for half of their prescription to be filled because they cannot afford the full amount, or those who cannot pay to have the preliminary medical tests for $200,000 and more before they have the medical procedure done to save their life." End of quote. He said the church has a calling to attend to the state of life in the nation by upholding the dignity of persons and the imperative for the pursuit of justice. Quote again, "At the same time, the church must also attend to the walls of its temple and the renewal from time to time of our covenant relationship with God in Jesus Christ. This renewal requires a reawakening of our call to mission and ministry, which resides in our baptismal covenant, end of quote. Archbishop Gregory challenged the members of the diocese to renew their baptismal covenant so that they may be blessed with energy for social action and generosity in stewardship, among other things.
Well, my first comment, it's so refreshing to hear an archbishop, without flinching, addressing social issues, political issues, issues of a spiritual nature that affect the common man. In Dominica, yes, we have a few speaking. We have Pastor Rodney and the other pastors on that program, Pastor Jack and Pastor Augustine. Is it Augustine? No, the short pastor from Marigot. I forget his surname.
It's not coming to mind.
Yeah, but my point is that, here you have an archbishop.
August,
August is the other pastor. So they speak out on a regular basis. But I wonder about the bishop of the Roman Catholic Church. I wonder about the archbishop of the Anglican and Methodist Church. We would really like to hear more voices adding. You have a responsibility as the church, as the man of God, as leadership, as the conscience of a nation, to speak out boldly without fear or favor. And it was really refreshing that you brought to light this article.
Yeah, and another thing I would like to add to what Dan is saying is that a lot of our leaders, civil leaders, expect them to speak on the issues, as those are the union leaders, church leaders, and other civil society leaders on these issues because it affects their membership. And so they go stay quiet, stone cold quiet on these issues. And right now we are between a rock and a hard place right now. I see what I just went on social media and see what a young person had to say. Guys, are we even surprised that government expenditure are higher than the taxes? Because reading the article from the IMF, it was already clear to see that the government is spending way more than what is coming back to the economy. I don't even have to mention the way the funds are being wasted. And if you don't know how, then my friend, you need to open your eyes. Anyways, I am waiting for the budget. So young people are beginning to see what is going on with in terms of the economy, how it has contracted and what's going on.
Yeah. I have a comment. But is there any question in anybody's mind, going back to this article, which is set in Jamaica, but you could take out the name of Jamaica, read the rest of the article. Well, replace the name Jamaica with Dominica.
Yeah.
And the article is fine.
Yep.
Because is there any doubt in anybody's mind that in Dominica, especially in the last 23 years, under this Labour Party government, we have developed a culture of corruption, thievery, fraud, dishonesty, extortion, and scamming. Is there any doubt in anybody's mind in Dominica?
No.
And the leaders of church, the moral voice of the country, the leadership of Christians of good conscience across Dominica, and they aware of that?
Yeah. Today I was just to mention, today I was having a discussion with a church leader, with a priest, on some of those issues came up, and it goes back. His comments were in sync with what is being spelled out in the article right now, and it's about who is going to speak out on behalf of the people.
Yeah, but given where we are, given the state of the country, you ask yourself, where are the people with integrity who are serving the nation in law enforcement? Where are they? Because the only thing they seem concerned about,
the workers,
are people walking, standing for rights, people calling the radio station to express their concerns about things that are going on and criticizing the actions of government and so on. That's the only thing that law enforcement in Dominica seems to be concerned about.
Right.
So you have this huge focus on Hector John claiming that there'll be civil disobedience if there's no electoral reform. Was that what you said, Hector John?
Yes, just that.
And that becomes a reason why the state must engage lawyers
From Trinidad.
Lennox Linton at a meeting in Lago in 2017, along with Thompson Fontaine, Edison James, and others.
Nicholas George
and others, simply expressing ourselves, not breaking the law in any way, not inciting anybody to do anything, not obstructing anybody. The police have manufactured charges of obstruction and incitement.
Right.
And the police kidnapped Danny Luge on the public road in his constituency, the constituency that he represented in parliament as the duly elected representative. The police kidnapped him on the public road. He was interfering with nobody. He was obstructing nobody. And up to today, he's still awaiting his day in court. So when that is the focus, law enforcement totally agreeing to having the law enforcement system that they represent and where they work weaponized against the persons in the society and institutions in the society that the sitting government does not like. Where are you going with that? We are destroying the country. We are destroying the Labour Party. Let me not say we. The Labour Party is destroying Dominica.
Have destroyed to me. No, this is
Well, the destruction continues, you know. You always feel that there's a point at which you can reverse it,
right?
And you could bring an end to it. And one way to bring an end to it, of course, is to get them out of office. And we have gone the peaceful route. We say elections, and the elections have been tainted. So last few election cycles, we've been calling for reforms of the process. And we've been calling for reforms simply because we have recognized that through the years, the people's electoral process has been systematically taken away from them. When they don't have that electoral process because it is available for manipulation by one group of people, right? That one group of people is effectively taking away from all of the people of Dominica the right, the sacred right, to elect a government of their choice by their majority votes of conscience. And you cannot have a more fundamental corruption of the voting and the democratic process in the country than that. In democracies, people must be able to elect their government and not have a government imposed on them by the will of some corrupt leader of government who has decided he will rig the system so that his re-election legacy is not interfered with.
Right.
No. Just to close on that point. We have been pushing hard for reform of the electoral process. And we are at a stage now this year where something has to be done. Because back in 2022, more than 2 years before the constitutional due date for an election, Mr. Skerritt called a snap election, claiming that he wanted a reset. Mr. Skerritt cannot want a reset and take his reset, where the nation deserves to have its systems and procedures for democratic engagement reset, and we're not able to do that. If you personally can get your reset, what about the nation's reset? And the nation's reset has to be about free and fair elections that delivers a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So we have to push for those reforms. We have to ensure that the legislation in the image, in the likeness of the people of Dominica go into effect this year. And by the middle of next year, all of the arrangements have been made for the clean of the list and for the issue of ID cards and so on, and for all of the access to media and the campaign finance reform, so that we can have a proper election no later than the mid-year 2024. That is what we are working towards.
Okay.
And people, listen carefully. This is not about one or two people speaking to you and making sense in your head. This is about the collective will of the people of Dominica pushing forward, joining hands, joining hearts together, and making sure we return our country to right order, beginning with a proper process that delivers free and fair elections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Linton. You're listening to the Workers' Voice on Q95 Radio, the 13th of April 2022. We're discussing the IMF Article 4 report on Dominica April that came out this month. Some of the concerns we heard earlier on, clips from our political leader, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and also our president, Mr. Lennox Linton, and we'll continue the discussion. You can call in and join us on 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097. Overseas number 305-432-9624, 305-432-9624. You can also WhatsApp us at 265-4334, 265-4334. You can also comment on our Facebook Live, Q95 FM Radio, on Q95 FM Radio on Facebook. We are live there as well. You're listening to Workers' Voice, as I said. Good evening to you, Mr. Peter Thomas, New Jersey on Island right now. Nice. It was nice meeting you. Good evening to Vibes, the people at Vibes Auto Parts, Auto Shop, in New York, 4801 White Plains Road in New York. Good evening to you. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, sir.
But I take joy. I'm in real joy listening to the program. But let me ask you guys, do you all take joy when people like me listen to the program and everybody listen to the program? Are you happy about it?
We want to learn. We want all people to listen and learn and educate themselves. That is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I ask this right because I'm here from the starting. I stayed until the ending. I made a request this afternoon because every time I listen to Mr. Linton, I now can understand more clear every day why they wanted to go with him. Tonight, in the course of the program, please play that thing for me. Make me more happier tonight. I'll be very.
Which one is that?
When they ask him to go with him. Anytime I hear this, I know why. So please play it for me. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, thank you very much, Cole. Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. Let me just take this call. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Good evening, Bragg. Good evening to the rest of your group.
Good evening.
I've heard Mr. Linton and our Roseau North representative.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bragg, you owe me a ticket there, and I want to know when you'll be there again because I want to buy some more.
Yes, your ticket is in the office. You can collect it, but we will be at the front of the Prevost Cinema tomorrow from 8 a.m. Thank you for reminding me. And we will be selling more tickets for the car raffle will take place on July 3, 2023.
All right. I want to have a ticket in every segment of the bin.
Okay.
Okay. Gentlemen, there's something that I heard Mr. Skerritt say on a clip that Matt played today. And he's talked about the equipment, the cost of equipment, and the standard that the equipment had to be at, a high standard. And I suggest, it seems to me he was insinuating that the equipment that he's getting or the contractors are bringing down to build the airport are of a high standard and quote unquote, subtly or however, it's going to cost more. But some of that equipment is breaking down on the way to the airport. I saw some of that equipment broken down on the way to the airport. So I'm saying to myself, wait a minute. He's telling us that the equipment's supposed to be a high standard. Can't get to the job site without breaking down. So all those little things, he tries to use all these little things to inflate price. But Mr. Skerritt, we know better than that. You cannot fool us with that. You cannot want to inflate price, make it sound so expensive, and then whatever happens to the real cost of it and where that money goes once it has been inflated. Because remember, it is your friend, the head of MMCE, who got the contract, right? He got the contract and he subcontracted it to the Chinese, as far as we understand. So, you cannot fool us with this business again. Don't try to fool us again, Mr. We know your mode of operation. MMCE got every government contract for building public housing with no bidding. So don't try and fool us. We know you're inflating, and we don't know how it is being distributed underneath the proverbial table. Enough said, gentlemen. Good evening.
Thank you very much for your contribution, caller. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Hello, good night.
Good night, sir.
Yes, I understood that they're going to have a parliament on the 24th of this month. I would like to know if it's in the relationship of the election reform. And if it's that, why would it have got consultation? And if it have got consultation, what would happen? Whether the people protest against that? I would like to hear all you talk about that.
Okay, thank you very much, caller. I haven't heard anything about it. If there's a notice is out for Parliament as yet, I haven't heard the 25th. But as to what is on the other paper, we have not seen it as yet. So that it's only when we have a copy on the other paper is out, we can really tell you what is on.
But I'm agreeing with this caller.
Yeah.
That all Dominicans should stand by and stand watch to be on the outside of Parliament to ensure that the people get its wishes. Earlier on, you heard Honorable Lennox Linton talking about the people's reset, and we're going to push towards the people's reset so that we can have, our say in terms of electoral reform. I have this brother, Bernard Allen, from the United Kingdom, with a comment there. I'm here, brother, listening. One of the things that I would like yourself, or Lennox, to highlight is the irresponsible practice on the part of the government to pass budgets over recent years without much scrutiny, only to then come with exorbitant supplementary expenditure months later, with much of this being over expenditure on approved amounts for projects such as the Marigot Hospital, which is yet to be opened and may even have flaws in its construction. People need to understand that this is excess money and where it has gone, and it has gone somewhere. But where? And will the same on a massive project such as the airport project, they must be made to understand the massive profits to be gained by the MMC on this project, and without challenge and accountability, as seems to be the case routinely with other projects. That's an interesting comment by Mr. Allen.
Very interesting observation. But the caller made. Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying that the caller made reference to all the projects that MMC got, and a lot of them have flaws before even being open. But it have already been open and they have flaws. And these are they were built for resources. And as today we're having a discussion about these resources now. There are people in them, and they own nothing, and they pay nothing. And this maintenance have to be done by the state, where in other government, Danny spoke about it. You have the past Labour Party, Freedom Party, United Workers Party had housing projects where people got low-cost housing, got their loan. Blue can come and confirm for us, got their loan, and pay for their houses, and it's their own right now. They can take a loan, send a child to school, to study, or use it to even expand their property. And right now, you have state property, people living in them, and the state have to maintain this property. How long we can sustain that type of action by this government?
Anthony Hayden and Montreal Management Company have never developed any airport before.
No.
This is the first airport that they're going to
CR5 as well.
Okay. It don't even come to CR5. Let's stay with the developer for a minute.
Yeah.
Because the developer who has never been associated with the development of an international airport is the same one that is selecting a main contractor that has no prior international airport experience. Okay. But what has Anthony Hayden done in Dominican MFC? He's been involved in all of these housing projects with the passport money of Dominica that he can do what he wants with. He doesn't have to tender for any job. He doesn't have any competition. He just gets what he wants, and he does what he wants. So when he delivers what he wants, then shortly after, we find out that there are issues with the construction, whether it's the housing complexes and the faulty sewage, or the cracks in the walls in some of the health centers, or the community centers. There are defects.
Water in the sockets of the
Good.
yeah.
So now the question is, you have hired somebody to do these works. You prefer them, they're your friend, they do that for you. And then you review the work and you find all these faults. Are you still going to continue to engage this person and give them even more work to do for you, a bigger project to do for you, a project that is by itself bigger than all of what he has done for you so far, which has been unacceptable, but he's getting more work to be done? Something is wrong with that. It's not like he has this huge track record of working in an international airport or international airport development elsewhere. He has none. And notwithstanding the failures and the issues that have emerged with the construction he has done for you with our CBI money, he is being given even more responsibility for the airport. I find that to be totally and absolutely unacceptable. But that is what this government is subjecting the country to. If it was their money personally was spending, you think they would do it like that?
No.
You have to fix that. We have to fix that. And the people who are benefiting from it are not the ones going to fix it, Dominica. It's good for Skerrit, because he alone knows all the things that he is benefiting from as a result of engaging this particular individual. To be keeping the money overseas, to be spending it as he wants, to be doing what he wants with our passport money, Skerrit is a beneficiary of that. He's not going to change it.
Mr. Linton, another point that was made that we should not overlook in terms of the rural economy. Dr. Fontaine made that point earlier on about the dollar, the banana dollar that was stretching in the rural community. We have seen a total demise of the rural economy. And now, let's look at the Wesley scenario, for example. That was a completely agriculture-based economy. They have removed everything from Wesley. They're going to clean up Wesley. These areas, these communities, right back to the Bacatel and these areas that was doing the Bay Oil. How do we re-inject resources in this economy to make this farmers viable?
Well, the money is there.
Right.
Okay, my argument is very simple. The money is there to do it. We can energize the agriculture growth engine with $250 million injection.
Yeah.
And we can start that tomorrow because the money is there to do
Right.
it. Okay. And what that will mean is that you're looking at all your Bay Oil production, for example, and you modernize all the stills.
Yeah.
Okay, you put money, you inject money into modernizing the stills.
Toluma Farine.
Let's get some state-of-the-art production equipment, manufacturing equipment for Toluma, for Farine, for our Bay Oil, and so on. And let's energize the rural communities. Let's put some activity back in the rural economies where you have products that can be exported. So you go into a massive export production drive, export manufacturing drive, with all of the things that we can produce from our soils, and we can add value to through light manufacturing. And we have the money to do that. We have the money as well to get young people involved in building their country, in a partnership to build their country like they have never been involved before. You have a lot of these young people who have ideas, who want to do things, but who cannot find the resources to do it. You notice that the IMF report is indicating again that while the banks are liquid, while the banks are well capitalized, money is not being, you're not seeing credit from the bank for productive purposes. Right. We have enough money. And I said it in the parliament in the budget debate of 2022. We have enough money to start a youth entrepreneurship development bank that will facilitate that partnership with youth in building the country, so that all of the ideas that the young people have, whether it is in creating digital content, whether it is in branching out to provide digital services in the metaverse or wherever, we must find, we have the money to finance that, and we must do it. So this question of, Hector, this question of energizing the economy, the rural economy, the national economy generally, is not rocket science. Yeah. It is that the government of the day has refused to do it, is refusing to do it, because keeping the country as it is and going along with the suggestions that they're getting from the IMF and so on is good for them, because that way they continue to keep the country poor while they continue to abuse public office for their private gain.
Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice. Hello, listen to us.
Good evening, Dominica. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Linton, in the statement from the IMF, how did they recognize, or how did they describe the CBI sale of passport in Dominica? How did they describe? To me, they say record CBI sales. How did they put that? Because I believe the IMF is aware that Dominica have billions of dollars out there, but I don't think it is within their right to make that call and say how much to bring controversy. But they're still telling you in their statement there was record sale of CBI passport. And if you listen, I listen to you, Mr. Linton, and I picking up a sense that the IMF want Dominicans to fight to liberate their country by suggesting the government have to lay off people, the government have to raise taxes, but they know, and they know Dominicans know that Kerry has money where he can pay the debt and have Dominicans living a better life than they're living now. So when I listen to the IMF, I listen to how well you explain it, I still say professionally they have to talk that way or they have to write that way. But when you get them into it, they are telling Dominicans there is something systematically wrong in the economy of Dominica. You have two accounts, one for Skerrit and one for the parliament. The one for Skerrit is greater than the one for parliament. And they're trying to get Dominicans' attention. that they have to fix that economy and Skerrit continue playing hardball. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, caller. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Yes, good evening again, Spring.
Good evening.
Yeah, something like beekeeping. You see that thing they call beekeeping?
Yeah.
First of all, you can set up your bees and go to your regular job. You don't have to be watching them every day or tending to them all day. It's something that you can do. It's low maintenance in that sense. But the bees are working for you. They're bringing in honey. And also, having bees in near an agricultural plot helps the yield, because the bees are pollinators. In big farms, you guys come with a thing like a tractor trailer, of bees, and open it up, and the farmer pays him to stay there, and his bees collect the honey. He gets honey, and the farmer still pays him to stay there to increase his yield of his crop. So I believe that this is one of the activities that should be taught, should be facilitated. And I mean, that's only one. There are many others. This is just one that I know about, because I had an uncle who used to do that. But I mean, there are many other things like that. Roosevelt Skerrit is killing agriculture, and Dominica is agrarian based. And it's devastating to the country, and it prevents people from being independent. When you have a farmer who is well-to-do, he's independent. You cannot just get his vote like that. You cannot force him to vote for you because you have him on a string trying to feed him a sausage. He's independent. He has food. He can live off his farm. So I believe, that is my own speculation, that Roosevelt Skerrit is reading from a playbook that knows how to degrade people, to take their power away, and then to come and control them. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your contribution, caller. Let's take this call and come to you, Mr. Luge. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Linton.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. John. Good evening, Mr. Luge.
Yes, good evening.
Good program, as usual. All the advice that the government is getting from everybody is good advice, from the U.W.P, any one of them, and all of them would yield benefit to Dominicans. But it's not going to happen, because this government is not going to do it. It's not in their interest. What's in their interest is to keep the people poor and to keep the people keep coming back and begging to them. There's only one thing that is going to bring this country back on its feet, is to get rid of this government. That is what everybody's going to do collectively. Find a way to get this government out of office, because all the advice has been coming to them over the years. It's falling on deaf ears. The only thing to bring this country back is to find a way to get this Labour Party government out of office, and all the advices, all of them are going to work, but none of them are going to work now. They're not going to make any difference while this government is in office. Is to get this government out of office, and then you start seeing Dominica getting back on its feet. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for calling in.
Take it.
Yeah. We have one more call coming in. Hello, good evening on the overseas line.
Good evening, Sprague.
Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
All right. Mr. Linton, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
How you doing, man?
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to make two observations. One on the banana, knowing that Dominica always had a great record of production in terms of our bananas. I know we lost that market with that World Trade Organization stuff. We lost the preference we had on the European market. I know we lost it. But since Britain stepped out from the EU, right? Why can't Dominica renegotiate a bilateral deal with England to see if we could send our bananas to them country to country negotiation instead of the European Union. That's number one. And number two, you made a comment about the debt to GDP, because I personally had that experience with a few friends who are labor rights and good friend of mine, but we always stuck. We don't keep that malice, blue cannot talk to red. And one of the observations they were making to me at that time when U.W.P lost that election is that the debt was too high. U.W.P had a huge debt. Now we know in all government that passed through Dominica already, this Labour Party has received the most revenue by selling the passports. And yet the debt is over 100% to GDP. So I think we as supporters have a lot of work to do in terms of talking one-on-one with, because a lot of Labour rights, I still think they like Dominica, I really do that. We have the top brass or those who benefit personally for using public office for their personal gains. There's who want to put up the fight, but I think Dominicans in general want a better Dominica. And that Labour Party receiving the most revenue in all government that passed through Dominica has the debt the highest. So I would like to hear what they have to say about this right now, because 105 or 107% to our GDP. We never had that before. And you're right, it's a lot of propaganda that will be spreading and lies and rumors, but we just have to take it easy and explain, because the United Workers' Party has been right on the issue every time. They have a record to show. They could. If Skerrit was so good, why he can't run on his record? He ain't got no record to run. The only record is a bunch of corruption, a bunch of lies, deceit, hatred, division, and just bringing the country down. So I think every support of the United Workers' Party and the New Freedom Party, I wouldn't say new, but for lack of better word, I would say the New Freedom Party has to challenge these people with the issue, because they know better. These people knows better. They know what Dominica used to be and what Dominica can be and what it is now. And on the Labour Party government led by Roosevelt, Skerrit, and all his cabinet, all 26 of them, all of them just have to go. The Attorney General, everybody, we just need a clean slate. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in. I'll call in your friends for you, Mr. Corbett, Vidal, Chicky Boy, and all the others in Salisbury listening.
Yeah,
this is Bob Marley. Stay firm. How are you doing?
I'm glad you could say good night to him for me. Thank you.
All right, my brother. God bless you. Say hi to your mom for me.
Yeah.
God bless.
Yeah.
To your earlier question to Mr. Linton, my suggestion, and as the second time I'm making that suggestion public, in the world today, there's a great need for water. Dominica is one of the islands in the Caribbean with an abundance of water. I believe that we have enough money that the same infrastructure required for petroleum in all of the islands, you could have a similar infrastructure set up for countries in the Caribbean which are water deficient. You have Barbados, you have the Virgin Islands, you have several islands, neighboring islands, which requires
and less expenses to build the dams and reservoirs.
Let's set up, let's get a few tankers. That would be a great investment, because we know going into the future, we're going to have greater and greater need for water in these other Caribbean islands. So if you have those tanks set up, for example, in Barbados, the same way they have infrastructure for petroleum products, you set up tanks for water. Now, you could add value when that water arrives by putting them in bottles to create jobs over there too. But Dominica could be supplying islands to the north of Dominica and south of Dominica with water. I mean, why aren't people thinking, that is a viable project?
No.
If it can be viable for petroleum, it must be able to be done for water.
And I just want to add to what you're saying. We were in Parliament sometime in 2011, 2012, when Mr. Norris Prevost was still a member of Parliament and member of Parliament for Roseau Central. And he made the recommendation of, I think we were debating the geothermal and thing. And I said, why not go to stay in hydro and get some smaller hydro plant in different parts of the country, because we have a lot of water, instead of spending all that money on geothermal, and within maybe months or a year we would have hydropower from these geothermal these hydro plants have mini hydro plants around the island. And lo and behold, it's maybe close to 11 years now, and we have not seen not even light a house from geothermal. Not saying that the project might not get to the end, but we have spent over $100 million, and we have not seen anything where we could have spent a few $1 million, have mini hydro plants in some of these areas,
Solar also,
and solar, wind, and whatnot, and see where we are. And you're seeing a steady increase in the price of electricity, but we have not done that. And you see, United Workers' Party had those visions a long time. 10, 11 years ago, Mr. Prevost made that observation in Parliament, and we are still trying to deal with that geothermal project. Mr. Linton.
The gentleman asked for the audio.
See, I have this one audio.
It's right there.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to address, in particular, some of the issues around GDP.
Yes, sir. I click on it. It's still highlighting this one. Okay.
And we have to find a way to send a clear message to Leonard Clinton. You got so much paper, so much problem you caused for $1.2 billion, so much problem, stress. I mean, when are we going to arrest Clinton for that injustice against the people of Dominica? Pick him up and just go with him. And the guy, just go with him. No problem, see. Mr. is a headache. The man is a problem.
I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Let's go right ahead. And up to now, we are not just on this. Just go back to go right ahead, Danny.
Yes.
Yeah, your mic is on. Sorry.
No.
Okay, this one. I'm sorry. What that?
Okay. I noticed we winding down,
Yeah.
but we have Mr. Emmanuel kind of clarifying an example of what is inflation. Inflation occurs when there is a broad increase in the prices of goods and services, not just of individual items. It simply means you can buy less for $10 today than you could yesterday. In other words, inflation reduces the value of your currency over time and decreases the amount of grocery and services that your dollar can now give you. Who does inflation hurt the most? Prior research suggests that inflation hits low-income households hardest for several reasons. They spend more of their income on necessities such as food, gas, rent categories with greater than average inflation rates, leaving few ways to reduce spending. So that's an explanation of inflation.
A WhatsApp message there. Good evening. Good evening, JJ. Good evening to all the gentlemen on the panel. I am still waiting for an answer. Or that's Facebook. People need to be educated about electoral reform and all the wrongdoing of this one man wealth. I pray for traveling mercies for you all. Have a blessed and peaceful night's rest. I'm listening. So you have people listening. There's someone saying last year they made some other intervention, but with this one, last year they made young people fill in forms for house in Wana. They cut down trees. Nothing happening since after the election. Trees growing back in the area. So that's another election scam. Good evening. Once again, you have been listening to us for the past about 2 hours now, discussing the IMF Article 4 report. You heard a clip from our political leader, Dr. Thompson Franklin, that gave us an insight from his experience as a professional economist on what to look for and what is going on in our country. And also, we had a breakdown from our President, Mr. Leonard Clinton, on that same IMF report. We have we welcome your intervention. We have heard different people make different comments on it, and we see it as a real problem where we are right now. We're in a very sticky situation as a country. Word on the ground right now, we are going to have austerity measures. We are hearing that some people have not received salaries for March from statutory boards. So we're having some challenges already with the economy. We've seen it. You have to be really blind not to see that things are happening, for you not to see that we have issues in the economy and in the country right now. If you look in the rural the countryside, the rural economy is really, really dead. I mean, we worked in the industry, Danny, and you know that the amount of 4x4s that will go down in the country, the amount of homes were being built, renovated. Farmers were proud to have their cable TV at their home, their water, their washroom. They would set up themselves, make themselves comfortable. Right now, you have these same farmers are depending, and the children depending on the government to give them housing and provide things for them where they were providing for themselves. And that's like we see United Workers' Party always believe in making the common man independent, give them the opportunity to provide for the family, for the children, to build the communities, to expand the communities. We were removing all the dead ends and creating opportunities for expansion in communities and people getting closer around the island. So we where we are right now, we need to see what is going to happen, but we have to prepare ourselves. Parliament will be on the 5th of this month. 25th of this month, and when the other paper is out, we will see what is ready there, what they're going to Parliament for, and if electoral reform is not part of that discussion, or going to amend the laws and maybe respecting the views of the people and ensuring that we have the reform that we asking for. We have to stop talking the talk and walk the walk. Put boots on the ground permanently until something happen. I think I come to the radio program every Thursday night as a member of our party to educate our people. But everybody's saying, when you're doing something, when are you all doing something? The 25th of April.
Mark your calendar.
Mark that on your calendar. We all should be doing something. We cannot sit by again and say, leave it for Lennox Clinton and leave it for Thompson Franklin and leave it for Danny Lugie and Francisco Joseph and Rosanna Emanuel and Hector John and all the others of the United Workers' Party, or leave it for the Wednesday workers. We have to begin, or leave it, and the public officers as well. You have to begin to stand with the leadership of your unions and begin to demand questions, answers from the government. I think that is, and also our nurses, our doctors, our lawyers. We have to stop leaving it. It's their thing. It's our thing. And we have to bring our young people on board. Our young people have a very important role to play, because if we don't leave a proper foundation for them, we are going to be in chaos. Mr. Lugie.
Yeah, well, my closing comments would be to thank all the listeners. I know there was a lot to chew on, and in particular, I want to thank the callers. I think the contributions from the callers are significant. I want to remind you that tomorrow we'll be outside Privo Cinema from about 8:30. We'll have our car displayed in a different way. This time around, it will be on raised level on a vehicle.
Right.
So make sure you come out there and get your tickets. An opportunity to win a Mazda Demio for only $5.
Also a flat screen TV and a rice cooker.
Yeah, so I say good night and God bless. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you. I close by paraphrasing Anglican Archbishop of the West Indies, Dr. Howard Gregory, in his comments and assessment of the Jamaica situation where he's calling for leaders to stop fiddling with and emasculating the Integrity Commission of Jamaica so that it could do the work of eradicating corruption as a scourge and a blight on the society of Jamaica. To say that in Dominica too, we have developed a culture of corruption, thievery, fraud, dishonesty, extortion, and scamming. And that we are growing tired of the pervasiveness of corruption and the inability of the leaders in government and the law enforcement of the country to act decisively in addressing the situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Linton. Thank you very much, Mr. Lugie. Thank you very much, callers, listeners. A farmer just sent me, a farmer from the River Street area sent me a WhatsApp message, and I read that final WhatsApp message saying, farmers used to borrow civil servants' money for month-end. So the farmers had extra cash and they had lending power. And, so we just want to big up everybody listening. Yes, my good friend in Mr. Stevenson down in the River Street area. Good evening to each and every one of you for listening. And just as I always say, when we leave here on the weekend, find a place of worship. Thank God for a wonderful week, and also go there and thank Him and ask Him for guidance into the new week. Wish you a happy weekend. Don't forget to join us tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in front of the Prevo Cinema Hall. You can get the tickets only $5 for. You can win a Mazda Demio, a rice cooker, and also a flat screen TV. Thank you for joining us. We love you. God bless you, and have a wonderful weekend.
Representatives backed the legislation, which is expected to be signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis. Speaking before the vote, a Republican representative, Jenna Persons-Mulitska, expressed support for the bill.
Today we lead, today we stand for life. We stand with mothers, and we stand with Florida families. And by your vote today, we change the culture of abortion to a culture of life.
The bill may